James Hartley sat alone in the corner of the cafe, staring at the chair across from him. He adjusted his crisp white shirt, straightened his tie, and tapped his expensive leather shoes against the polished floor. Around him, the cafe was alive with laughter, clinking cups, and soft music. But he felt completely invisible. Tonight was supposed to be special. A friend had set him up on a blind date, promising that the woman waiting for him would be perfect, kind, intelligent, and someone who could understand a man like him. But as the minutes passed and the chair remained empty, James felt a strange, gnawing emptiness inside him. Despite all his wealth, his fancy apartment, and his luxury car, he realized he had never been truly alone like this in a room full of people. His business empire had grown beyond anything he could have imagined, and people admired him, envied him, even feared him at times. But none of that mattered now. Money could not fill the spaces of the heart, and tonight, the emptiness felt heavier than any failure he had ever faced. James glanced at his watch. 30 minutes had passed. 40. He sighed and stirred his coffee absent-mindedly. The rich aroma of the freshly brewed drink did nothing to comfort him. He imagined her walking through the door, her smile, her voice, the way she might laugh at his nervous jokes. But no one came. His mind raced with questions. Had she forgotten? Was she afraid? Or had this entire blind date been a mistake? He looked around the cafe again. Couples held hands across tables, sharing secrets and smiles. Friends whispered and laughed together. Families celebrated small victories with cheerful chatter. And he sat alone, surrounded by life but untouched by it. James felt the first real pang of loneliness he had experienced in years. Not the fleeting kind that comes after a long day at work or a canceled dinner plan, but a deep, quiet ache that made his chest heavy and his thoughts turn inward. He remembered the countless times he had tried to buy happiness with gifts, vacations, and parties. All the expensive watches, suits, and vacations in the world had never given him this feeling. A simple connection, a hand to hold, a heart that truly understood his own. And tonight, sitting here with nothing but the hum of the cafe around him, James realized how much he had missed in life while chasing money and success. The waiter approached, offering a polite smile. "Is everything all right, sir?" James forced a smile and nodded. "Yes, thank you." But inside he felt a storm of disappointment. He had planned for something extraordinary, something that might finally fill the quiet corners of his life. Yet here he was, alone, sipping bitter coffee, and hoping against hope that she would still arrive. As he sat in silence, his thoughts drifted to simpler times, long before money and business had consumed his life. He remembered Sunday mornings with his parents, laughter echoing through a small house, the warmth of genuine human presence. Those moments had been fleeting, and as he grew older, ambition had replaced them. Love, trust, and companionship had been pushed aside in the pursuit of success. And now, he wondered, could he ever recover those lost pieces of his heart? James looked again at the empty chair, his reflection faintly visible in the polished surface of the table. He whispered to himself almost as a promise. Maybe tonight will still be different. Maybe tonight someone will see me, not the millionaire, not the businessman, just me. As he stirred his coffee one last time, trying to hold on to a fragile hope, he didn't notice the small figure entering the cafe, a little boy no older than 6 or 7, paused at the entrance looking around with wide, curious eyes. He held a small toy car in his hand, but it wasn't the toy that caught James's attention. It was the innocence in the child's gaze, the honesty that seemed to shine brighter than anything money could ever buy. And at that very moment something shifted inside James Hartley. Something he hadn't felt in years, a quiet anticipation. The first flicker of a connection he thought he had lost forever. The little boy took a careful step toward James's table, his tiny shoes making soft tapping sounds against the cafe floor. His clothes were simple, slightly worn, but neat, and he clutched a small toy car tightly in his hand. His eyes, wide and full of curiosity, seemed to study James with a mixture of caution and hope. "Excuse me, sir," the boy said softly, his voice small but clear. "Are you waiting for my dad?" James blinked, taken aback. "Your dad?" he asked, uncertain how to respond. He wasn't expecting company tonight, and certainly not a child. The boy nodded earnestly. "He said he'd meet me here. And then you too?" James's brow furrowed. I'm waiting for someone, yes. But your dad?" "My dad," the boy said, tilting his head. "He's busy sometimes, but he told me to wait. He said, 'Wait here and I'll be right back.' I've been waiting a little while." The boy's gaze flickered toward the door, and then back at James. "You were here too, so I guess you're waiting too?" James felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. The little boy's innocence, his quiet certainty, struck a chord deep inside him. He had spent years learning to read people, to negotiate, to control every situation. But this child, unguarded and honest, reminded him of something he had long forgotten: trust. He offered a tentative smile. "Yes, I suppose I am waiting too." The boy smiled back, shy but bright. "Do you want to wait together?" James hesitated. He had never spent time with children in such a personal, unplanned way. Yet something in the boy's earnestness invited him in. He nodded. "I think I'd like that." They sat together, the little boy fidgeting with his toy car and James quietly observing him. There was something so pure about the boy's presence. No ambitions, no pressures, no expectations, just a small human being, full of wonder and hope, waiting for someone he loved. "So, what does your dad do?" James asked gently, trying to start a conversation. "He works a lot," the boy replied, "but he's funny. And sometimes he comes home with little surprises, like candy or comic books. He always says he's busy, but he always comes back when it really matters." James felt a lump in his throat. He realized he had never had anyone wait for him like that. Not a parent, not a friend, not a partner. He had wealth, yes, and power, but no one who believed in him unconditionally. This small boy, with his simple words and unwavering faith in his father, had reminded James of something he had lost: the comfort of being truly seen. The boy glanced at James and then at the empty chair across from him. "Are you sad?" he asked suddenly. James blinked, surprised. How could a child know? He shook his head, forcing a smile. "No, not really." The boy tilted his head, unconvinced. "You look sad. But it's okay. Sometimes grown-ups forget to smile, but it's still inside them. I can see it." James laughed softly, a genuine, heartfelt sound he hadn't made in a long time. "You're very smart," he said. "I think you're right." For the next hour they talked quietly. The boy shared stories of school, friends, and his favorite toys. James listened, occasionally offering comments or questions, but mostly just listening. Each word the boy spoke chipped away at the loneliness James had carried for years. The simple joy in the child's voice was contagious, and James felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. He noticed how the boy's eyes never lost hope, how he kept glancing at the door with anticipation, and James realized that hope was something he had buried deep inside himself. Watching this little boy wait for his father, believing that he would come, James began to understand that life's most important moments were not planned or controlled. They were lived, shared, and sometimes simply waited for. And as the boy turned his head, smiling up at James with trust and innocence, James Hartley felt the first real connection he had felt in years. It was not with a woman, not with a business partner, not with wealth or power. It was with a small, brave little boy who reminded him that love, patience, and hope could still exist, even in the most unexpected places. James Hartley watched the little boy fidget with his toy car, turning it over in his small hands and occasionally rolling it across the table. The boy's focus was intense, yet his eyes kept darting toward the cafe door. There was something comforting about the child's innocence, a stark contrast to the calculated world James lived in every day. Here was someone who measured life not in deals, profits, or achievements, but in moments, hope, and simple joys. "Do you come here often?" James asked, trying to make conversation. though he wasn't sure what he was really asking. The boy shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. Sometimes, my dad likes this place. He says the coffee smells like happiness or something. James laughed quietly, the sound soft and unguarded. Smells like happiness, he repeated. That's a very nice way to describe it. The boy nodded solemnly. I like nice things, but I like people more. People tell stories you can't buy with money. The words hit James harder than he expected. He stared at the boy, seeing a truth he had tried to ignore for years. All his money, all his success, all his power, it had never bought him a true connection. And yet here he was, sitting across from a child who didn't care about his wealth, his car, or his name. All the boy wanted was his presence, his attention, and perhaps his friendship. For a moment, James felt unsure how to respond. This wasn't business, where every interaction had a plan, a strategy, a goal. This was life, raw, unpredictable, and beautiful in its simplicity. And he realized he had forgotten how to live in such a moment. Do you like your dad? James asked quietly, unsure if the question was even appropriate. The boy's face brightened. I love him. He's funny and he works a lot, but he always comes back, even when he's busy. I wait for him because he told me it's important to wait for people you love. James felt a lump in his throat. The words were so innocent, yet so powerful. They carried a weight he couldn't ignore. He thought of his own life, how he had chased deals, contracts, and riches while letting real connections slip away. He had always been too busy, too proud, too careful. And now, sitting here with this small boy, he realized how lonely that choice had made him. The boy's gaze softened. Sometimes I get scared he won't come, but he always does. That's why I wait. You should wait too, mister. Good things come if you wait. James swallowed hard, a quiet tear forming in the corner of his eye. He had spent so long avoiding vulnerability, fearing disappointment, fearing failure, that he had forgotten what it felt like to hope. And here was a child, no more than 7 years old, teaching him that the courage to wait was a gift in itself. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the hum of the cafe filling the space around them. James watched the boy roll his car across the table, his small hands moving with care and focus. Each movement, each innocent word was a reminder that life was not just about achievement. It was about presence, love and trust. You know, James said finally, his voice soft but earnest. You're teaching me something very important tonight. The boy looked up, his eyes curious. What? That waiting? Waiting for someone, trusting them, believing in them. It's more powerful than anything I've done in business or money, and you remind me of that. The boy grinned, a small but bright expression that seemed to light up the entire cafe corner. See? I told you waiting is good. For the first time in years, James felt a calm he could not buy. He realized that the little boy was not just a child waiting for his father. He was a mirror showing James the parts of himself he had lost. Innocence, hope, trust, and the simple joy of human connection. As they waited together, James felt an unexpected bond forming. It was not romantic nor transactional. It was pure, honest, and real. And he knew deep in his heart that this small moment could change everything about the way he lived, loved, and looked at the world. The boy glanced at the door again, and James noticed a spark of excitement in his eyes. Somewhere beyond that door, the boy's father would appear, but in that moment, James hardly understood something he had never understood before. Sometimes, the greatest gift was simply being present with someone who truly needed you, and letting them teach you how to be human again. James Hartley felt a quiet calm as he sat with the little boy, watching him fidget with his toy car while his eyes constantly flicked toward the cafe door. The boy's energy was soft yet vibrant, full of hope and anticipation. Each glance, each tiny movement carried the weight of a simple truth. He trusted the world enough to wait for someone he loved. You really like your dad a lot, don't you? James asked gently, leaning closer. The boy nodded eagerly. I do. Even when he's late or busy, I know he'll come back. He always does. He said people who love each other find a way. That's why I wait. James smiled softly, feeling an ache deep in his chest. He had spent decades building a life of success, surrounded by luxury and respect. Yet he realized he had never truly understood what it meant to wait for someone with your whole heart. Money and power had always rushed him past life's simple truths. And now, in the presence of this little boy, he felt a humbling clarity he hadn't expected. The boy glanced at James again, his small face serious but open. "Are you sad because no one comes for you?" James paused, taken aback by the child's honesty. He had expected small talk, perhaps questions about work or hobbies, but not this piercing observation. He looked down, forcing a smile. "Maybe I am. A little." The boy reached across the table and tapped gently on James's hand. "It's okay. Waiting isn't so bad if someone's coming. You just have to believe." James's throat tightened. He had never experienced such pure empathy from anyone, especially not someone so young. The child had no reason to care about him, no reason to notice the loneliness behind his polished exterior. Yet here he was, offering comfort, hope, and understanding in a way that touched James more than any business deal or trophy ever could. Minutes passed. The cafe continued to bustle around them, the world moving at its usual hurried pace, but James felt like time had slowed. He listened as the boy told stories of school, of friends, of small adventures that seemed ordinary yet extraordinary in their simplicity. Each story reminded James of what life could be when experienced through the lens of hope and trust, rather than fear and calculation. Then, just as the boy began describing a daring game he had played at the playground that morning, a man entered the cafe. He looked around anxiously until his eyes landed on the boy. Relief washed over his face, and he hurried forward, scooping the boy up into his arms. "There you are. I was worried," the man said, his voice a mix of exhaustion and joy. The boy laughed and wriggled in his father's arms. "I told you I was waiting, and I met someone else who was waiting too," he said, pointing at James. James looked up, surprised. The father's eyes widened slightly as he noticed James sitting there. "Oh, thank you for keeping him company," he said sincerely. His voice carried a tone of respect, not obligation. "I really appreciate it." The boy turned to James, a bright, innocent grin spreading across his face. "You see? Waiting works." James smiled, a soft, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. In that moment he realized something extraordinary. The boy's father had arrived, but the true gift wasn't the end of waiting. It was the journey they had shared together while waiting. He had been lonely, yes, but that loneliness had led him to an unexpected connection, one that reminded him of what it meant to care, to hope, and to be human. As the father ruffled his son's hair and thanked James again, James felt a surge of gratitude and humility. In this small, crowded cafe, surrounded by the ordinary chaos of life, he had found an extraordinary lesson. It wasn't in money, it wasn't in power, and it wasn't in carefully planned moments. It was here, in patience, in kindness, in the quiet courage of a small child who believed in waiting. And for the first time that evening, James Hartley didn't feel lonely. He felt connected, touched by the simplest yet most profound reminder that life's true treasures often arrive when you least expect them, but always when you are willing to wait and notice them. After the father arrived and thanked him, James Hartley remained seated for a moment, watching the boy run joyfully toward his dad. The laughter, the warmth, and the small reunion struck a chord deep inside him. He realized that while he had been waiting for a stranger, what he had found instead was a lesson he didn't even know he needed. The boy's simple trust and unwavering hope had reminded James of a truth he had long ignored. Life's most valuable moments are not bought, scheduled, or planned. They are lived, shared, and sometimes simply waited for. For all his years of chasing wealth, deals, and recognition, he had overlooked the quiet magic of connection. And now, sitting alone, he felt a mix of gratitude and humility that washed over him like a sudden downpour. He remembered his own childhood, years ago, in a large empty house where laughter had been rare and love had often been measured in expectations. His parents had worked hard, provided him with everything money could buy. Yet he had craved something far simpler: a hand to hold, a voice that truly listened, a presence that reassured him he mattered. In that moment, he realized that the little boy's patience and trust mirrored what he had always longed for. James leaned back in his chair, taking a slow sip of his now lukewarm coffee. He thought about how often he had rushed past life's small joys, how he had allowed his busy schedule to outweigh the moments that truly mattered. The boy had been patient, hopeful, and kind, and in return James had learned a lesson in humility and humanity. A soft smile formed on his lips as he glanced once more at the father and son. The boy's laughter rang like a small bell of innocence, and James felt something shift inside him. He realized that wealth could provide comfort, but it could never replace warmth, trust, and love. Those gifts were earned in moments of attention, patience, and presence. James felt a pang of longing, but it was no longer heavy with sadness. Instead, it carried hope. A hope that he could still embrace life differently, that he could still learn to be patient, to trust, and to connect. The little boy had shown him that even in a world full of hurry and ambition, small acts of kindness and moments of patience could transform a person's life. As he sat there, James noticed the boy waving back at him, sharing a grin with the understanding that only children seem to carry. And James realized something profound. It wasn't the arrival of the father that mattered the most. It was the journey they had shared while waiting together. It was the moments of simple conversation, of shared smiles, of silent understanding, and of trust. For the first time in years, James Hartley felt a quiet, unshakable peace. He didn't need applause, recognition, or a grand gesture to feel fulfilled. All he needed was the courage to be present, to wait, and to care. And the little boy unknowingly had given him that courage. The cafe continued to hum with life, but James no longer felt like an outsider. He felt connected to the world around him, reminded of what truly mattered in life. Wealth, power, and success could give him comfort, but only human connection could give him meaning. Before leaving, James stood up and quietly waved to the boy and his father. The boy ran back, hugging him briefly, and whispered, "See? Waiting works." James chuckled softly, a warmth spreading through him. "Yes, it does," he replied, his voice full of gratitude and understanding. As he walked out of the cafe into the cool evening air, James felt lighter than he had in years. The lesson the boy had taught him was simple yet profound. Sometimes, the greatest rewards in life are not things you can buy. They are moments you share, the people you trust, and the patience you hold in your heart. For James Hartley, tonight was not the blind date he had expected, but it had been something far more meaningful. A reminder that even the smallest unplanned connections could change a life forever. James Hartley walked slowly out of the cafe, the cool evening air brushing against his face. The city around him was alive with lights and movement, yet he felt a calm he had not known in years. Every step he took seemed lighter, as if the weight of his loneliness had begun to lift. The little boy's words, the simplicity of his hope, and the quiet trust he had offered had stirred something deep inside James, a part of himself he had long forgotten. He thought about how often he had rushed through life, chasing goals and achievements while ignoring the quiet moments that truly mattered. The little boy had shown him that patience, trust, and human connection were far more valuable than any deal, contract, or bank account. For the first time in a long time, James wondered if he could change, if he could start to live a life that mattered not just for wealth, but for love and connection. As he walked, James remembered all the times he had been too busy to call a friend, too proud to apologize, too distracted to notice someone who needed him. Each memory carried a pang of regret, but now, instead of feeling defeated, he felt a sense of purpose. Maybe it wasn't too late to rebuild, to reconnect, and to embrace the lessons he had learned tonight. He smiled softly, thinking of the boy's simple but powerful advice. Waiting is good. Waiting, James realized was not a sign of weakness. It was a sign of faith, patience, and trust in life's unfolding. He thought about the countless opportunities he had overlooked because he wanted instant results, immediate satisfaction, or guaranteed outcomes. The little boy had reminded him that sometimes the greatest rewards come when you simply wait, hope, and allow life to reveal itself in its own time. James stopped by a small park. Looking at children playing, their laughter echoing through the air, he watched a boy help his friend up after a fall, then share a toy without being asked. A sense of wonder filled him. The world, he realized, was full of small miracles, acts of kindness, patience, and love that often went unnoticed by grown-ups who were too busy to see them. He thought of the boy again and the way he had trusted James in such a short time. That trust had changed James in ways no amount of money ever could. He felt a new responsibility, not to buy happiness but to nurture it, not to chase recognition, but to create moments of real connection with people who mattered. James looked up at the night sky, the city lights twinkling like stars around him. He felt hope for the first time in a long time. Maybe tomorrow he could call an old friend. Maybe he could reconnect with family members he had neglected. Maybe he could open his heart to experiences he had once ignored because they weren't convenient or profitable. And then he smiled, imagining the little boy waving at him one last time from the cafe, his small voice full of joy and certainty. See, waiting works, yes, James thought. Waiting, believing, trusting, it all worked. Life had a way of giving exactly what was needed, often in ways you could never predict. For the first time in decades, James Hartley felt alive, not as a millionaire, not as a businessman, but as a man who had remembered how to hope. The lesson was simple yet profound. Life's greatest gifts are often quiet, small, and unplanned. They arrive when you are ready to see them, when you are willing to wait, and when you are open to connection. As he walked toward his car, James made a silent promise to himself. He would live differently. He would listen more, care more, and embrace moments of patience and trust. And maybe, just maybe, he would find the joy that had eluded him for so long. Not in wealth, but in the human heart. The night wrapped around him like a comforting blanket, and James felt a peace he had never known. Tonight he had not found the date he had expected, but he had discovered something far greater. A lesson in love, patience, and hope that would stay with him forever. James Hartley walked slowly toward his car, the night air cool and calm around him. The city lights reflected softly on the pavement, but nothing in the glittering streets or the passing crowds mattered as much as what had just happened inside the cafe. He thought about the little boy, the toy car, and the way that simple presence had touched a part of his heart he had long thought lost. Tonight he had not found the blind date he expected, but he had discovered something far more profound, a lesson in patience, hope, and human connection that would change him forever. As he slid into his car, James reflected on the boy's words. Waiting is good. They had been so simple, so innocent, yet they carried a truth he had never fully understood. Waiting was not a sign of weakness, nor was it wasted time. It was an act of faith, of trust in life, and of courage to believe in others. He realized he had spent so many years rushing, demanding, and controlling everything. But the real beauty of life lay in the quiet moments that unfolded naturally, without force or expectation. He thought about his own life, the years of ambition, the relentless pursuit of wealth and status, the countless nights alone in his large apartment. He had achieved more than he ever dreamed, yet something vital had always been missing. A human connection, a shared moment of trust and love, the warmth that could only come from being truly present with someone. And tonight, through a little boy, he had glimpsed that warmth. The memory of the boy's smile stayed with him. It had been a smile full of hope, trust, and innocence, the kind of smile that could melt the hardest heart. The boy had waited, not with impatience or frustration, but with quiet belief that life would bring what he needed. And it had. For James, that small act of waiting had revealed a truth he could no longer ignore. Life was not about what you had, but about how you shared it and with whom. James parked his car and sat for a moment, staring at the stars above the city skyline. He made a silent promise to himself. He would live differently from now on. He would not chase people or moments with calculation or fear. Instead, he would be present, patient, and open to the unexpected joys of connection. He would reach out to old friends, call family he had neglected, and maybe even spend time helping others, knowing that giving presence and care could never be measured by money. The boy's father had arrived, and their reunion had been beautiful. But James realized the true gift was not just seeing them together. The gift was the lesson, the awakening, and the reminder that life's most meaningful moments often arrive in the simplest and most unplanned ways. A child's trust, patience, and courage had reminded him of something vital, that the heart could still hope, even when life had seemed lonely and cold. As he drove home, James felt a quiet joy rising inside him. He thought of the little boy waving goodbye, the sound of his laughter echoing in the cafe, and he smiled genuinely for the first time that evening. For years he had measured success in numbers and achievements, but now he understood that the truest success lay in connection, compassion, and love. Money could buy comfort, but only people, only presence could fill the heart. James reached his apartment and paused at the door, taking a deep breath. He felt lighter, freer, and more alive than he had in decades. The night had not given him a date, nor a romantic encounter, nor an expected reward, but it had given him something far greater: clarity, humility, and the rekindling of hope in his heart. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that the boy's simple words, "See, waiting works," would stay with him forever. They were a reminder that life could surprise, teach, and heal when you least expect it. James smiled softly and whispered to himself, "Yes, waiting does work, and hope always finds a way." For the first time in years, James Hartley felt complete, not because of wealth, not because of status, but because he had learned the quiet, powerful lesson that the human heart, when patient and open, could find love, connection, and meaning in the most unexpected places. The night embraced him with its calm serenity, and James knew that from this moment forward, his life would never be the same.